In July 1916, the Budapest police received a phone call from Szentkotta, Hungary. A landlord discovered 7 metal drums on a property that he rented. When authorities finally arrived at the property, they tried to open the drums, but a repulsive odor seemed to emanate from the containers. Detective Chief Charles Nag, who arrived on the scene after being summoned, assumed the investigation and opened one of the drums against the protests coming from one of the civilians at the scene, a Mrs. Jakubek. In opening the first drum, Detective Nag discovered the remains of a woman who apparently suffered from strangulation. The other remaining drums yielded the same results. A search of the nearby house revealed 24 additional bodies, and the man living there seemed to be away from his home at the time. Authorities worried that since Austria-Hungary was still at war, that the man who rented the property, a soldier in the Hungarian army, may have either been taken prisoner or killed in combat at the front. This man, identified as one Bela, was an Austrian soldier who rented the space and then hired Mrs. Jakubek as the housekeeper. Detective Nag arrested Mrs. Jakubek, who lived at her own home and did not stay at the Kish residence. The detective then contacted the local post office to hold Kish's mail to make sure that if he had an accomplice, he could not alert the missing soldier. Jakubek tried to assure the police that she had nothing to do with the murders, and Detective Nag determined that Kish left money for the housekeeper in his will. When the detective and the army of police descended on the Szentkotta residence, they searched the abode and discovered a secret room that Jakubek was forbidden to enter under any circumstances. When police entered the room, they discovered bookcases and a desk which held numerous letters. It appeared that Kish wrote these letters to over 74 women. Along with the letters, Detective Nag found a photo album. Many of the books contained within the room were full of topics from poisoning to strangulation. After careful examination of the letters, Detective Nag realized that Kish wrote these letters in order to defraud the women. These women were looking for a husband, and it appeared that Kish wanted to take advantage of their lonely predicament to fleece them of their military pensions or dowries. During a war, especially as one as destructive as World War I, it seemed the perfect confidence. Kish would place Lonely Hearts advertisements in local newspapers and just watch as his mailbox filled with letters from all over the Austro-Hungarian Empire, from lonely widows or youthful spinsters seeking companionship or marriage. Another component of Kish's modus operandi included selecting women who had no relatives, and if they disappeared, they would not be missed. At first, Kish wooed the women, and then strongly suggested that they send him money. In addition to the letters and the photo album, investigators discovered 2 lawsuits that had been initiated against the rogue, but both women had mysteriously disappeared and the lawsuits had been dismissed. Bela Kish was born in 1877 and pursued the vocation of a tinsmith in Szentkotta, now part of Budapest, where he lived with his wife since 1900. His neighbors considered him to be pleasant, and he never presented any problems, but he did have an affinity for the dark arts. Kish dabbled in amateur astrology and followed the occult. His wife, Marie, found a lover and left Kish in December 1912. This must have been a trigger of some kind, because the disappearances commenced with this personal event. With his newfound bachelorhood, Kish began his correspondence with the women and then hired the elderly Mrs. Jakubek to be his housekeeper. The old woman ignored the endless parades of women coming to the residence and never gave it a second thought. At about the same time, Kish also began to collect barrels of gasoline, claiming that with the approaching war, there may be a massive shortage, and he wanted to make a little money. Simultaneously, Hungarian authorities sought the location of 2 women that had suddenly disappeared in 1912. The 2 widows named Schmiedak and Varga were later seen in the company of a man named Hoffman, who lived near the Margaret Bridge in Budapest, but he had also disappeared without a trace. An inspector at the time, a Szentkotta constable, was aware of the disappearances but never associated the description of the mysterious Herr Hoffman with the quiet and unassuming Kish. In November 1914, Kish was drafted into the military to fill the ranks of the War to End All Wars. After swearing in and receiving his equipment, Kish headed toward the front. 18 months later, Sinkota officials saw that Kish's name appeared on the rosters of the dead that appeared in the local newspapers. The inhabitants of Sinkota forgot about Kish for a while until some soldiers showed up in the village to search for Kish's cache of gasoline. When investigators actually found the drums, they realized that there was no gasoline to be found. Instead, the smell of decay permeated the small house, and even some of the soldiers got physically ill. After the discovery of the bodies and further investigation, Detective Nog uncovered that Kish had been posing as the elusive Herr Hoffman. Piles of cards from hopeful widows were discovered in a drawer. Authorities firmly believe that Kish may have murdered the women and then pickled them into the drums. A further search of the countryside surrounding the residence revealed 17 other drums, with one of them containing the body of Marie Kish, the assumed dead soldier's wife. Paul Bakari, Kish's wife's lover, was the only male victim found within one of the drums. Police theorized that Kish murdered his wife and her lover in a jealous rage and buried the bodies where he believed they would not be discovered. Then, he went on a murderous rampage throughout his home region where he baited lonely women in order to con them out of money and then murder them in an attempt to conceal his crimes. Police honestly believed that Kish had committed the crimes and then performed a sordid patriotic duty by dying for his country. But one must ask the question, if someone were to embark on a career of serial murder, no matter what the duration, would not a war cover his tracks so that he could continue his killings at another place in time? And if he were to be declared dead from combat action? Or was he? In the spring of 1919, someone thought they sighted a man that matched Kish's description at the Margaret Bridge in Budapest, the place where Herr Hoffman allegedly met two women who later disappeared. Later investigations revealed that Kish switched identification papers with the man who died as a result of wounds he sustained at the front. This knowledge did not help the investigators to locate their suspect. In 1924, a deserter from the French Foreign Legion told officers of the Sûreté about a fellow legionnaire who entertained his contemporaries with stories of his skill with a garrote. The soldier was identified as a man named Hoffman, and he matched the description of the wanted killer. But that lead proved to be a dead end. In 1932, an excited New York detective named Harry Oswald felt certain that he spotted Kish amongst the voluminous crowds in New York's Grand Central Station. Unfortunately, Oswald lost whom he thought was Kish in the crowds. In 1936, rumors spread that Kish had maintained a job as a janitor at a building located on 6th Avenue. After an investigation into that rumor, a man matching Kish's description had worked there, but he obviously received word about the notification and again escaped capture. No one knows what happened to Kish, but one thing is for certain. He was responsible for the deaths of 23 women and one man. Women trusted this con man with their money, and eventually it cost them their lives. Now, if you would like to support our channel, and I hope you support our channel, you can find us on Rumble, BitChute, and we have a PayPal account. Also, we're on Facebook and Twitter at this time. Until next time.